everyone, and welcome to our special side event at COP26 towards a shared blue prosperity under a changing climate. This event is co-hosted by WorldFish in partnership with the Climate and Sustainability Development Network and Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation. The links between climate change, the ocean, the blue economy, and aquatic food systems have never been more obvious. The ocean, inland water bodies, and related aquatic food systems play an essential role in the daily lives of billions of people, as well as many animals and plants that inhabit both our planet in land and in water. The ocean makes life possible by providing half of the oxygen of Earth. For coastal populations especially, the ocean is a critical source of nutritious food and livelihoods. It is also an intrinsic part of people's culture, heritage, spirituality, and well-being. The blue economy alone contributes more than $1.5 trillion a year to the global economy. In absorbing carbon dioxide, the ocean plays a crucial role in regulating the climate. Our very existence and prosperity as people and as society are intertwined with the health and the sustainability of the ocean and aquatic food systems that are connected to it. My name is Tana Lala Pritchard. I'm the Executive Director of Strategy, Innovation and Communications at WorldFish, and I'll be moderating today's event. Together with a distinguished panel of speakers, we will explore a number of questions related to blue prosperity and the issue of climate change. But more importantly, we will learn about innovative solutions that are already happening in this space and discuss an ocean of opportunities with triple benefits for people, nature, and the economy. Before we get started, I would like us to play a quick animation on aquatic foods and aquatic food systems.
We can't have a healthy planet without well-nourished people consuming diverse and sustainably produced food. At WorldFish, we work with small-scale actors, researchers, and governments towards ensuring a future where the unmatched potential of diverse aquatic foods is sustainably utilised. With research, innovation, policies, and investment in aquatic foods, a sustainable, healthy food system for millions of people could be a reality. From diverse aquatic food systems, like the coastal fisheries in Timor-Leste, homestead ponds and wetlands in Bangladesh, to the lakes and rivers of landlocked Zambia, sustainable innovation and management solutions are improving how we catch, grow, harvest, process, market, and consume aquatic foods. Aquatic foods are aquatic animals, plants, and microorganisms grown in or harvested from water for food or feed, and their synthetic substitutes. For example, finfish like tilapia, shellfish like shrimp, and plants like seaweed. Aquatic foods provide an essential source of protein and micronutrients to the diets of 3.3 billion people, and are recognized as a superfood for their nutritional benefits to cognitive development and disease prevention. 800 million people's livelihoods depend on aquatic food systems, especially those in developing countries. The naturally low carbon footprint of aquatic foods adds resilience to communities struck by climate change and makes sustainable aquatic food production a key solution for the future. Currently, among the world's most traded foods, the demand for aquatic foods is increasing. The volume of aquatic food production will reach 204 million tonnes by 2030. Shifting global diets to include more aquatic foods would see transformative improvements for billions of people in developing countries, with improved livelihoods, nutrition, income, and rights for women and young people. Spread the word. Aquatic foods for healthy people and the planet.
Thank you. So first up, I would like to introduce you to Dr. Gareth Johnstone, Director General at WorldFish, who will provide a few opening remarks. He's a member of the Royal Geographical Society and the International Association for the Study of the Commons. He serves in the steering committee of the World Economic Forum on Sustainable Aquaculture to 2030, and he's also the Senior Director for Aquatic Food Systems with OneCGIAR. He led the formulation of a new strategy on innovation in aquatic food systems for healthy people and planet, which was launched successfully last year at WorldFish. Over to you, Dr. Johnstone.
Thanks, Tana, and welcome to all of you who are joining us from around the world. I'm really pleased to welcome you to this important UN Climate Change Conference Side Event titled Towards a Shared Blue Prosperity Under Changing Climate. I'm also very proud that WorldFish is co-hosting this event with the Climate and Sustainability Development Network, and I'm admire of their work in Africa and the blue economy. I'm also very happy and grateful to be sharing this platform with the Climate Change Department of Ministry of Environment and the Climate Ocean Trust and the Pan-African Climate Justice. Welcome to you all. So WorldFish has had a long legacy of research and innovations on inland and coastal fisheries, aquaculture in the Global South. Working in partnership with national governments, research institutions, communities, businesses, our research work goes back almost 50 years. More recently, we have responded to the call to action to transform food systems, one of the pillars of COP26, and successfully launched last year a new 2030 research and innovation strategy on aquatic foods for people and planet. Now, aquatic foods, what do you mean by aquatic foods? Aquatic foods are aquatic animals and plants grown in or harvested in the wild from water for food or for feed, and their synthetic substitutes. This year, I'm extremely proud that WorldFish won both the 2021 World Food Prize and also the 2021 Arrow Food Innovation Award, which is an unprecedented achievement in the CGIAR. The CGIAR is the world's largest agriculture research and innovation network that we've been a member of since 1992. And this was awarded to my colleague, Dr. Shakuntala Thilsted, Global Lead for Nutrition and Public Health at WorldFish, who will be speaking shortly, for her groundbreaking scientific work at the intersection of nutrition, fish, and aquatic food systems that is actively shaping a new global narrative on the increasing importance of aquatic foods for sustainable food system transformations towards healthy and resilient diets. It's also informing the critical priorities for the next 10 to 50 years on the global agriculture research and innovation agenda, the nutrition agenda, and the future of the CGIAR network and beyond, as we are here now, tackling the shared complex challenge of transforming the world's food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. Now, today is COP26 Nature Day, which puts emphasis on protecting and restoring nature for the benefit of people and climate. Triple wins for nature, people and climate can be realized through investment in sustainable aquatic food systems. Now, aquatic foods emit much lower greenhouse gases relative to land-based food systems, an important point to remember. Sustainable management of aquatic animals and plants means stored CO2 that would have otherwise been released to the atmosphere. Now, a recent study found that sustainably managed fish alone can remove 1.65 billion tons of carbon from the atmosphere. So investing in sustainable management of aquatic ecosystems and transition to aquatic food-based diets offers huge opportunity in putting our food systems on a low emissions pathway. Now, aquatic foods must be used now and in the coming decades to address malnutrition, lower our environmental footprint of the food system, and provide livelihoods to millions of people in poverty. A sustainable and equitable transition to aquatic food systems diets will deliver this triple win for nature, climate, and people. Now, to get us there, it needs significant investment in research and development of aquatic food science. Is needed to further enhance the environmental benefits and deliver maximum benefits to people, both in terms of meeting nutritional needs, which we'll hear about shortly, and creating viable livelihood opportunities under changing climate. Now, climate mitigation alone cannot prevent many anticipated negative impacts on aquatic food systems. Multiple scientific studies conclude that sustainably managed aquatic food systems buffer communities against some of the impacts of climate change by enhancing their capacity to respond to climate risks. We have good examples from our research of resilience of fishing communities after cyclones in Vanuatu in 2015, and the restoration of the Hilsha, a massive fishery in Bangladesh. Despite the global importance of aquatic food systems, there has been insufficient attention paid by policymakers in climate-related policies, such as nationally determined contributions and national adaptation programs of action. And again, this has been exacerbated by a chronic underinvestment to addressing climate change. Now, WorldFish, our research, aims also to provide research and innovations that respond to climate challenge and evidence to inform policy and investment decisions, helping to build resilience of aquatic food systems. Our work is focused primarily on low and middle income countries in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, where there is the highest concentration of vulnerable communities that depend on fisheries and aquaculture, and where the consequences of continued inaction will be catastrophic. However, in this event, I'd like us to focus on solutions that help us realize a world where aquatic ecosystems and the people who depend on them can have the opportunity to generate prosperity and well-being. The realization of shared blue prosperity requires that we have both the hard infrastructure in place, such as marketplaces, food processing plants, cold storage, alongside the soft infrastructure, such as the institutions and the policies that operate together, can help to eliminate systemic barriers that undermine individual and collective well-being and the capacities for flourishing. In doing so, creating employment and income opportunities for the many, not just for the few. To respect ecological boundaries that lead to new innovations in regenerative aquatic food production systems. What I mean by regenerative? Well, we're looking at seaweeds cultivation, which is a natural sequester of carbon that does not require any land for cultivation, and can serve as a basis for new integrated aquaculture systems with fish, shellfish, seaweed to increase production while decreasing environmental impact, and an area of research that we're currently exploring with others, and to ensure that vulnerable individuals and communities benefit more. And to this, I would add the massive opportunities to unlock new value from loss and waste in the supply chain and reap back the estimated $22 billion per year that are lost in waste and loss from the global harvest and fisheries and aquaculture. That's 1 in every 3 fish that is lost. And this is particularly important for youth and entrepreneurs to develop new commercially viable products, services and markets, and also to empower women who work in the informal sector predominantly for better and more secure jobs. So with sustainability and inclusivity at its heart, research and innovation in aquatic food systems can unlock multiple wins across many of the Sustainable Development Goals. Today, we will listen to our esteemed speakers on the roles of state and non-state actors, such as the private sector, civil society, and research institutions in food systems transformation to deliver better nutrition, reduce poverty, and address the environmental challenges that we face as we head to the 21st century. How to align incentives and investments so that technology and digital innovations can catalyze the transition towards a shared prosperity. We will identify critical technical and institutional capacities needed for a transformative approach to address climate change, as well as innovative financing mechanisms to deliver impact at scale. So with those thoughts, I wish everyone a successful event and a stimulating and thought-provoking discussion. And I thank everybody for attending and listening in. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnston, for that generous overview of linking the issue of climate change to aquatic food systems and the various sort of complex issues related to it. I would like now to invite Dr. Essam Yassin Mohammed, who's joining us virtually today. He's the Global Lead for Climate and Environmental Sustainability at WorldFish. Is a member of several advisory bodies, including the group of experts for the second cycle of the regular process for global reporting and assessment of the state of the marine environment with the United Nations. So over to you, Essam, and thanks for joining us.
We cannot hear you.
Essam, we can't hear you. Can you see if you maybe unmute yourself? Okay. Maybe we'll come back to you, Essam, in a little bit while we give the technical team the opportunity to help us. But let's sort of then get us started with the first speaker in our panel, Dr. Shakuntala Thilsted, who is the Global Lead for Nutrition and Public Health at WorldFish. She was awarded this year the 2021 World Food Prize for her groundbreaking scientific work at the intersection of nutrition, fish, and aquatic food systems. And she also won recently the 2021 Aral Food Innovation Awards. Shakuntala, congratulations on these achievements. It is quite clear that aquatic foods and aquatic food systems are having quite the moment at in the spotlight, thanks to the work that you've been doing and also the advocacy around it. But what is their connection with the climate change agenda? Can you help sort of shed some light on how research and innovation in aquatic food systems are critical to blue prosperity as we work to address the climate crisis?
Thank you, Tanya, for giving me the opportunity to talk about aquatic foods in relation to food and nutrition security and climate change. Aquatic foods play a key role in creating healthier, low-carbon, climate-resilient food systems. The diversity of aquatic foods, animals, plants, and microorganisms offers opportunities to explore synergies and build resilience in mitigating climate change. Aquatic foods have lower carbon footprint compared to terrestrial animal source foods. Diverse aquatic foods from different water bodies, marine and inland waters, have low or negative greenhouse gas emissions. Therefore, production of diverse aquatic foods can be increased to contribute to food and nutrition security needs without increasing greenhouse gas emissions. Aquatic foods are often overlooked in policies and solutions for agriculture and food and nutrition security, as well as those related to climate change. However, there is evidence that diverse aquatic foods can contribute to sustainable solutions for some of the challenges that our global food systems is facing. For example, research at WorldFish has shown that farming systems that integrate diverse fish species and rice result in smallholder households having more resilient food systems, generating both income and food from both fish and rice. At the same time, safeguarding and managing the enormous diversity of aquatic foods in the system generate even more opportunities for increased income and nutritious superfoods. Food loss and waste within the global food system, as we have heard from Dr. Johnstone, and also in the aquatic food system, is a big challenge which we must tackle in order to achieve our 2030 agenda for sustainability and efficient use of our planet resources. Aquatic foods are superfoods. They provide multiple highly bioavailable micronutrients such as calcium, zinc, iron, and vitamins, vitamin B12 and vitamin A. And increased intakes of these micronutrients and essential fatty acids in women and children in the first 1,000 days of life can improve cognition, development, and growth in children, as well as health and nutrition in adults. Thus, we must ensure that investments are made available to de-risk, build capacity, and resilience of aquatic food systems in the face of climate change, so that food and nutrition security of the poor and vulnerable is not compromised. Diversity is fundamental for ensuring that the full potential of aquatic foods for mitigating climate change is harnessed. We must shift from traditional aquatic foods, such as fish, crustacean, and bivalves, to also include aquatic microorganisms and plants, such as seaweed. Seaweed farming is showing great potential in mitigating climate change and contributing to adaptation and resilience. And this is in addition to seaweed being a superfood rich in multiple micronutrients and essential fatty acids. Therefore, policies and investments must take into account novel aquatic foods and food products that are climate resilient, as these have great potential both in meeting the food and nutrition security needs of millions of poor and vulnerable people, as well as mitigating climate change. Therefore, sustainable, nature-positive aquatic foods must be a key part of national determined contributions and national adaptation programs of action in COP26. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shakuntala. And speaking of national commitments, what best, to hear from than actually a person and who represents one of those governments. So let me introduce now our next speaker, Hajia Halima Bawa-Bwari. She is the director of the Climate Change Department with the Nigerian Ministry of Environment. With over 30 years of experience, she has worked as an environmental scientist focusing on nature conservation and management, industrial compliance monitoring, and biosafety management in Africa. Hajia, as Shakuntala points out, there are multiple benefits to climate mitigation adaptation that are associated with more research and investment in aquatic food systems. And these can help deliver triple wins for nature, people, and the climate. I understand now that the government of Nigeria has been mainstreaming fisheries and aquaculture in its national climate mitigation and adaptation plans. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and why is Nigeria prioritizing fisheries and aquaculture for climate action?
Thank you. My name is actually Halima, and the Hajia is just a title, which I don't use, but I thank you for your kind words. So basically, the way the governance of aquaculture and fisheries perhaps in Nigeria is that we have the Ministry of Agriculture doing the issues on food security and fisheries and perhaps the aquaculture. However, the nexus between them and the climate change Ministry of the Department of Climate Change of the Ministry of Environment is through what we call the Interministerial Committee on Climate Change, where we have the Ministry of Agric actively supporting that. Prior to my stint with the Department of Climate Change, I was, as you mentioned earlier, on the Nature Conservation Desk, and I actually worked within the sphere of the coastal and marine biodiversity. And there we did deal with a lot of issues on the marine space, which also, of course, included the fisheries. And I do remember that then we had a project from the Guinea Current Large Marine Ecosystem Project that helped to push even issues of fisheries and its productivity. And we did have a stint, a little thing on aquaculture. And I also understand that as a result of climate change, the productivity of fisheries reduced. So where do we now fill in the gap for our local communities and our population towards meeting our food security goals? It will have to be on the aquaculture. So the aquaculture we are using as a tool to bridge that food security gap when it comes to the issues of providing fisheries and protein to our general population. So what we've done so far is to have projects on the aquaculture featured in the NDC sector of what we call the fisheries, the agriculture, forestry, and other land use sector. Nigeria's NDC initially had 5 sectors, which also included the end of things. And then now with the revised one, we also have another sector added to that, the waste and water, which we are looking at the fisheries and aquaculture inclusive. So within this space, we look at projects that way, and we also have what we call the green bonds issuances that we've done, the sovereign green bonds. And in that space, we encourage a mandated ministry to come up with projects and programs, especially as we work towards the third issuance, towards helping push issues on aquaculture, ensuring that our communities have a feel of these projects and this funding that are basically national. However, we also have the window of pushing this through the GCF outlet and the adaptation fund outlets. This is what we've been able to do in synergy with the Ministry of Agriculture.
Thank you. It's very interesting to see that, you've added that new sector to the NDCs. And what are some of the challenges that, are faced in Nigeria with regards to the sustainable development of aquaculture, and where do you primarily focus on?
The main challenges would be policy, would be collaboration.
Yes.
Because when it comes to issues of food security, which includes aquaculture, it has to be some kind of liaison and collaborations with other ministries, departments, and agencies. So where we have a space where we do not have some kind of unifying policies that encourages that collaboration, it becomes a bit difficult to push some of the projects through and monitor and see how they're doing. So it's basically about policies that are needed. It's also about the collaborations, but then about the funding. But that if the policies is right, the funding gets easier.
Right, right. Thank you so much. Actually, it's, that point on the funding is a great segue into introducing the next speaker, Torsten Thiel. He's the founder of the Global Ocean Trust that focuses on marine conservation, technology, and governance. He has over 20 years of experience in structuring complex international project financing for public and private sector clients. And following a career in finance, a successful career in finance, Torsten devoted himself full-time to the challenging cause of ocean conservation and stewardship. So Torsten, I'm sure you agree with Halima as well that none of these sort of climate-related initiatives and opportunities in the ocean and related aquatic food systems space are possible without access to financing. So what kind of financing is required to deliver impacts at scale? What are some sort of innovative financing mechanisms out there that are helping kind of turn the tide in terms of bridging that gap? And then more importantly, are these mechanisms reaching the people that need those the most?
Thank you very much, and I'm very happy to be part of this important panel. I think you're absolutely right. We start out with a funding gap and an analysis of where are all the needs that need to be addressed. But I think the innovative finance approach is a really good way of reframing this as an opportunity. But it is only an opportunity if we address both the ecosystem component of what we're talking about, the resilience of the natural systems, as well as the needs of local communities and their engagement. And I was very pleased you referred to the blue bond, so that's on the product side. There's a whole range of innovation around products that we can specifically use, the innovation that allows us then to engage with existing financial sources, to bring those financial funders and structures into this particular space. But products are not enough. We need programs. We need to structure it. And I found it quite interesting at this COP that, and I wanted to break that down a little bit, that we have a discussion of millions, of billions, of trillions. And I think that is confusing for the non-financial world because there is an expectation that the trillions will flow, but we really need the millions still. And so I think I would break this down to saying the millions are really at the project level. That's where they need to be. So, for instance, we're working on a wonderful seaweed project in the Philippines where the local community is deciding which of the fishermen will get their local microcredit so that they can transition to seaweed, where it is about the value chain of seaweed, it's about the sustainability of running that seaweed farm, and it's about finding ways to identify these additional benefits that we talked about, the blue carbon benefit, the marine protection benefit. Putting the seaweed farm in the right places actually helps marine protection. And then the biodiversity, the spawning benefits that come with that seaweed farm. So there is an amazing array of opportunity at that project level if it's done right. We support this through the Blue Natural Capital Financing Facility, but we are still here in the millions. Now, when we talk billions, what we're really talking about is integrating these projects and ideas into the larger funding flows that are possible, for instance, around infrastructure, around the way the large development banks work, whom we are encouraging, enticing, explaining that nature-based solutions as part of an infrastructure approach are not only a sensible way to address resilience and adaptation, but they're actually a financially more effective way and a better way to bring in both local communities in the decision-making around the infrastructure and to bring in startups, innovative companies, new technologies. And so that's really the billion space. And the same in that billion space is these global value chains. It's the way we take the local product all the way in a transparent, traceable, sustainable way. So that's the big work at the billion space. But then you hear trillions, and what trillions really means is that the underlying financial system behind this whole global funding structure needs to be realigned so that incentives are right, so that those funds don't lead to, for instance, fisheries subsidies that support the wrong kind of fishing, so that these large investors say to the companies, to the actors, to the governments, we now have standards and frameworks in place that understand the value, the necessity of the ocean conservation part in it overall. And that's really where the trillions sit. So I think that's kind of helpful to break it down. And what the Blue Natural Capital approach is really trying to say is that we have these specific benefits from healthy food for local communities. We have these additional carbon benefits, but we also have resilience benefits, and we have adaptation benefits. And we need to value all of these, and we need to value them in an integrated way. And then the final point I wanted to make, because again, we had Ocean Day, it's Nature Day. We need to understand most of the planet is ocean, and the largest part of the planet's ocean is the high seas, and what we do there and how we regulate there has a real impact also on the coastal zones. So I'd encourage us to think ahead, to think about this upcoming treaty for biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions, to make sure that we get that in place next year so it gives us a governance framework that then allows us to bring in these financial mechanisms and structures that can support us on the local, on the regional, and on the global level. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thorsten. I have quite a few follow-up questions to have with you, but I think let's see if we can get Essam back on the line to join us. I understand that he's ready to join us. And then I will open up the floor for questions.
Are you able to hear me?
Hi, Essam. Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And I believe you can see my screen as well?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so very much. I've been immensely enjoying listening to the excellent interventions by you, Gareth, Shakuntala, Hajia Halima, and then followed by Thorsten. I'm so glad, in fact, this happened, because that gives me a very good perspective in terms of, how I'd like to share my points of view as well. First and foremost, thank you so very much for this opportunity, but also I'm profoundly disappointed I could not be there with you. but I'm glad the technology is finally allowing us to be able to do this remotely. So without further ado, I think we've heard from all the speakers about the significance of aquatic food systems in terms of for nature, economy, and people. They also have some ecological and cultural significance as well. So whenever we talk about the link between aquatic food systems and climate action, this helps us realize this is what's at stake, meaning in terms of the economies, in terms of the number of livelihoods that depend on the sector, but also in terms of the nutritional benefits that aquatic foods deliver to millions of people around the world, but more importantly also the majority of people who are living in poverty as well. So how is climate change affecting these aquatic food systems? As Gareth rightly said, the emphasis of today's discussion is indeed about positivity, about climate action. So I have limited my the negative impact of climate change to only one slide that I would like to share with you before I proceed. So in our recent study, what we found is that the impacts of climate change on aquatic food systems, on multiple aquatic food systems, including aquaculture, wild capture fisheries, be it inland or coastal. So a wide range of aquatic food systems. And what we found is all aquatic food systems are vulnerable or prone to the impacts of climate change, and primarily in the tropical regions where the majority of people living in poverty call home as well. So in another study by Chang et al. As well, purely from an economic point of view, there's a very fascinating study that was done that makes a distinction between the high-income countries and low-income countries. And if you pay attention to the gray curve that slopes downwards, that's the profit. And what this shows us is for low-income countries, profits from aquatic food systems are projected to plummet in low-income countries. For example, in Senegal, the assessment of the IPCC of the ocean and the cryosphere clearly showed us that sardines in Senegal are, for instance, migrating polewards at a rate of more than 50 kilometers per decade. And this clearly means those small-scale fishers along the coasts of Senegal, for instance, wouldn't have the financial nor the technical means to pursue these fish. And as a result, they'll be highly impacted. Having said that, this is assuming we're not taking action primarily now. If we take action, we can certainly reverse this. So can we reverse the trend and realize a prosperous future for all? I believe the answer is yes. And let me share with you some thoughts in the next few slides. One is purely from a mitigation opportunity.
Essam, can I ask you to share your screen, please? We can't see your slides.
Oh. I think I believe I'm sharing my slides, Tana, but can you see it now?
Yes, they're visible now. Thank you. Sorry about the
interruption. Good. So you haven't missed out on the positive story anyway. So in terms of the mitigation opportunities, they offer us a low carbon pathway to meet growing demand for food, aquatic food systems. And for instance, aquatic food systems, indeed, one way of looking at it is if we were to leave them and sustainably manage aquatic plants and animals, that means we are sequestering an awful lot of carbon, as Dr. Johnstone clearly outlined in his opening remark. But also, as we sustainably utilize, which is different from the conservation, but as we sustainably utilize aquatic food systems, they still emit much lower greenhouse gas relative to land-based food production systems. However, there's always room for improvement, and what WorldFish work and partners demonstrate is that, for example, our ninth generation strain of genetically improved tilapia demonstrated up to 36% reduction in environmental impacts, including greenhouse gas emissions in Egypt, for instance. And similarly, in a recent assessment which involved a number of colleagues from WorldFish and many other organizations and academic institutions, also found that the use of low fuel gear can reduce greenhouse gas emissions in some fisheries by 61%. And similarly for aquaculture, reducing feed usage and switching to deforestation-free inputs can reduce emissions from aquaculture by 50%. So therefore, this shows us there's a huge opportunity and scope for improvement still in putting aquatic foods on low emissions pathway. However, as we do that, as we make the transition to low carbon aquatic food diets or based diets, we need to take into account the equity concerns in terms of making sure those who are furthest behind are not left behind, essentially, and making sure they disproportionately benefit more than others. So therefore, putting equity at the core of our transition to low carbon food systems or aquatic food systems would be extremely important. And I would like to quote a very famous quote in the field of management, which is, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And what are we doing to this end? And again, we, WorldFish, and in partnership with others, we've developed a digital tool that would enable food producers or aquatic food producers to be able to monitor their environmental impact, including greenhouse gas emissions, and matching that with advisory systems that would help fish farmers to reduce their carbon footprint as well, and hopefully using that to align in with investment with incentives by creating bid price premiums or other market incentives. And this can visit the website. It's called fishscores.com. This is a digital prototype that's been developed, which is ready for scaling as well. So therefore, the key point here is, if we leave fish in the water or aquatic foods, we will be storing an awful lot of CO2 that would have otherwise been emitted. Or by sustainably managing, there is also a huge scope towards transitioning our food systems into a low emission pathway. Not only mitigation, but also adaptation or resilience as well. And through our work, we have identified 4 key intervention points that we believe are instrumental or key in transitioning towards a shared blue prosperity under changing climate. One of them is reducing vulnerabilities by reducing risk and exposure to hazards through nature-based solutions. Again, nature-based solutions, for instance, in the sustainable management of fishery, which can be categorized as a nature-based solution. I can give an example of the Hilsa fishery in Bangladesh, for instance, where the government has utilized its hard-earned cash to incentivize fisher communities to co-manage their resources, and as a result, this has yielded in a significant rebound of the fishery in a short period of time. And this is a point that Thorsten was making earlier about the bad subsidies. This is a good example of good subsidies where governments utilize their hard-earned cash to work with communities to restore fishery. And an estimate of the benefit or the revenue from Hilsa fishery, the economic value is estimated at $1.3 billion. And for every dollar invested in sustainable management of this particular fishery in Bangladesh yields about 11 times more than the cost. And similarly in Myanmar, the same fishery, an investment of $1 yields up to $9 in benefit. So this is no-brainer. This is a highly investable sector which delivers positive outcomes for nature, but also provides people with a sustained production of aquatic foods to meet their nutritional needs, but also creates income and employment opportunities, and at the same time helps us to store carbon and also offers resilience for communities as well. So this is a typical triple win and very investable intervention as well. And not stopping there, but also what's critically important is a lot of these small-scale aquatic food producers in particular lack access to the information to be able to anticipate or predict climate hazard. And to mitigate this, we have developed a digital tool, which is a web-based interface for authentic, localized, timely, and actionable climate information services for fish farmers in Bangladesh and in part of India, in Odisha as well. And this web-based tool, which is a telephone app, is expected to help them to be able to predict the climate hazard, but also it offers them advisory services as well in terms of what needs to be done when there is a temperature spike, for instance, or whether there is flooding expected, or the water acidity could change over the next few days due to the change in biophysical characteristics, for instance. It offers them with the advisory system, and this is expected to benefit more than 100,000 fish farmers between now and next year as we promote it more widely. And the third is very quickly is on enhanced capacity to respond, which is critically important. So once you're able to predict, then how you are also able to respond. And this is also, we focus mainly here on nature-based solutions, how a sustainable management, as Dr. Johnstone said earlier, in Vanuatu in post 2015 TAM cyclone in Vanuatu, for instance, where those people who were engaged in co-management of fishery, for instance, were found to be more resilient than other food producers, for instance, but also through diversification of aquatic food production systems by exploring some novel or new food production systems, such as seaweed, for instance, in Bangladesh, has also created a number of significant employment opportunities for women, the youth, and the elderly as well. And by offering them a additional capacity to be able to respond to some of the impacts of climate change. And purely from an economic point of view, an early assessment or preliminary assessment of this intervention demonstrates that for every dollar invested, the profit is about 11 times more than that. This is partly because the input cost is extremely low and doesn't require much labor costs either. And the harvest period is also very quick. And finally, we're not necessarily looking at the new innovations or new ways of production systems, but also the idea of tapping into traditional and indigenous and local knowledge as well. For instance, rice fish systems are another good examples. Rice fish systems in Cambodia and Myanmar have delivered multiple benefits in terms of enhancing water and land use efficiency, reducing climate-induced risk, and they're adaptable for diverse fish species. They rehabilitate degraded landscapes and offers a viable livelihood opportunity under changing climate. And again, sorry, I have an economist hat that I wear every now and then. I'm trained as an economist as well, so I cannot help but think from an economic point of view. The impact evaluation study has also demonstrated that rice fish systems in Cambodia and Myanmar, those households who practice the embraced or adopted the rice fish systems have seen an income increase of about 60% per year. So all these examples, all these different interventions, all demonstrate there is possibility, indeed it's within reach, to have a triple win for nature through sustainable management or restoring degraded landscapes, but also for people, offering them income and livelihood opportunities, but also for climate as well by putting our food systems on a low emission pathway through these innovative means. So this is a triple win, and I'm sure there are multiple other examples out there. Therefore, we need to celebrate them. We need to harness those and embark in this journey to realize a shared prosperity under changing climate. However, here is a statement. Aquatic food systems offer us a sea of opportunities to turn the tide on climate change and realize shared prosperity for all. However, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. So they have to be underpinned by by respecting the ecological boundaries, by eliminating systemic market barriers and access to non-market services as well, by making sure social and economic inclusion is at its core. As Thorsten was saying, there's sustainable and predictable finance in place. And as Hajia Halima was telling us, the need for that effective governance as well that would enable this machine to help us to realize that shareable prosperity that we all aspire to achieve under changing climate as well. So just to conclude, finally, I have a few points I've identified as a call for action. One is make sustainable, nature-positive aquatic foods a key part of nationally determined contributions. And I was very encouraged to hear this from the distinguished delegate from Nigeria, telling us that this is part of that as well. We need to see more of that. Include aquatic food systems, infrastructures, work, and assets in national adaptation plans and disaster preparedness and relief strategies. The transition to low-carbon aquatic food-based diets must ensure those who are furthest behind benefit most, ensuring no one is left behind. And adaptation and mitigation efforts in and through aquatic food systems must be underpinned by effective governance, predictable finance, social and economic inclusion, eliminating systemic barriers such as access to market and non-market services, and respecting ecological boundaries as well. With that, I'll conclude my intervention. Thank you very much, Tana. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Essam. Please do stay on the line. I would like to come back and pick your brains some more, but you've offered us a lot of food for thought, and I would like to unpack some of those ideas that you've mentioned in your presentation with the rest of the panel through some questions. So maybe I'd like to go to Halima first. We heard from Thorsten that obviously the ocean is the Earth's largest carbon sink. We've heard all these wonderful opportunities that have been highlighted by Essam, Shakuntala, Dr. Johnstone as well, with regards to what governments can do to increase, let's say, investment and engagement in this area. And for far too long, we know that, the oceans and related aquatic food systems have been actually absent from climate-related discussions. So how do we get critical decision makers like you to basically pay attention or understand that climate action requires action in this aquatic food space, fisheries and aquaculture? That is, what do you need, let's say, from others to help you in that endeavor?
Of course, what is required is a lot of talking, a lot of synergizing, and bring out the data.
Yes.
Yeah.
Present the data to the relevant governmental organizations and just keep the conversation open, and also perhaps even kind of guide on what needs to be done. This has been done with us for the NDC revision. I think that's good practice, where we have IPs that helped us to kind of from start to finish. We need to do this, we've mapped out what we wanted to do, and they check in on us. Have you done this? What about this? Perhaps it didn't work. What needs to be stepped down? What needs to be, So there's that need for that guidance from, I don't know, the platform you're going to come through, but the Ministry of Agriculture is also there, but then the synergy with the environment or the climate change or the biodiversity end of things. So it's about bringing out the data, helping us with raising the awareness, and helping us with touching base with the communities and those who are in the practice of aquaculture, perhaps even the marine artisanal fishermen and things like that. So it's about a lot of synergizing, raising awareness, and perhaps also raising funding if there's a need for it, and the technical assistance does help too.
And what about the private sector? I'm sure you see a role there about the private sector in terms of what can we do to sort of really build the sort of system incentives you mentioned about the policy and the business enabling environment, but really to kind of catalyze and mobilize these public-private sector partnerships in this area.
Yes. Just like in any kind of private, climate action, we've been told, and we're trying our best to do it, to bring in the private sector. Government cannot do it on its own. There's a lot that goes into climate action, including the part that agriculture plays. So yes, the private sector is there. What we've done for us in Nigeria with the private sector is we've tried to bring them to a roundtable kind of discussion, get them into the NDC conversation, and perhaps the climate action also in general, alongside the adaptation end of things. So it's about really trying to engage with them, and we have started. And then yes, we don't mind a little push from other platforms to get that done, because most of them are more of the numbers. How much can we make? Not looking at the ecological benefits and the need to be sustainable about what they're doing and how it also affects the climate scenario. So there's also, apart from engaging them, raising awareness a lot helps with commitments, helps with compliance. So that could be something that we're looking at too.
Thank you so much, Halima. Speaking of the private sector, I'd like to go now to Torsten. You know, we're hearing a lot at COP now that, you know, most of the discussions are also centering around establishing a carbon market and a blue carbon market at that. Now, how do we ensure that, you know, these new kind of innovations, market innovations will obviously benefit the people that need them the most? Because we know that, you know, traditionally markets don't really take care of everyone in the same way.
That's a very good question. I think it follows nicely from what we just heard, which is we need data and we need local empowerment to manage that data. And that's where I think there's such a fabulous opportunity for countries, developing countries, coastal communities to really step up and in a way leapfrog traditional systems and use new systems based around digital tools, around eDNA, around traceability, remote sensing. All that data then goes into the blue carbon assessment. So it's all part of understanding what your blue natural capital actually is. And the credits that come out of it are really just the next step. But because it is assessed properly and we have now these emerging methodologies around it that we are working on, I think this COP has been quite important in that sense, that the blue carbon community has been recognized as a critical player. That now allows the decisions around how these markets work and to make sure that the majority of the benefits arrives at the local community, at the country level. That's what the point of the whole system is. So, but to achieve that, we need that data-centric approach, and we need to get the technologies into the countries. And it's that technology transfer, it's that capacity building where the private sector companies can help a lot. And that's what we need to achieve, and then the value sits there, and the value can then be allocated appropriately. So it's really key that as we design carbon markets, we take these lessons into account, and we don't just take what didn't work in the past and now take it to a new world. We have now a new way of building it that is really based on data and on local capacity.
And just a follow-up question from that. If it were up to you, and I'm sorry for putting you in the spot there, but like, how would you like to see the blue economy accounted for in climate change negotiations?
Well, that's a wonderful sequence. So for me, the sustainable blue economy is really about this future economy that is based in nature and people. And so it's a growing part of the economy. We have a lot of sectors that already engage with the ocean that need to transition. But we have a core of a new future that is growing here, and we can get this one right. And that is the value. So what that means from a negotiation standpoint is that we can't push ocean coastal solutions into some sub-segment of it. It's really at the core of these climate tools allowing us to recapture the sense of abundance of nature and of working with that abundance. So it's a perspective change, and we can achieve that here by bringing to the climate world this much broader world of aquatic life, of real communities, and bringing, I think what was amazing, how we got ocean into COP at Paris, and partially understanding, because the climate methodology is in a way the simpler part. What we are now talking about is making it a tool for this broader challenge of sustainable development with biodiversity protection.
Right. Yes, and I would add actually, like at the COP in Paris, that's when we actually even started putting agriculture in the picture as well, which is a little bit crazy when you think about it, because it's pretty common sense. But, you know, Essa mentioned there's also some bad financing out there. Like, for example, the sort of fishery subsidies that have like these perverse impacts on people and the environment. And some of these, I mean, amount to, you know, estimates of 35 billion annually. So how do we redirect or reconfigure some of this stuff to bring about those benefits that you mentioned for both people and the planet?
I think a few years ago that was unclear, the how. I think we've sorted out the how. We put in to the WTO a letter last week signed by the 300 leading ocean fish expert scientists. There's very clear path. This is one of these points where we have delivered to the politicians at the WTO the answer. Now we need to make that switch, but also what we have to do is, it's not just about saving the money in the subsidies, it's about rethinking where we can put the money sustainably, sensibly.
Thank you so much, Torsten. And by the way, I encourage also our participants that are following us virtually to submit their questions online, and also here with us. There are 2 microphones at the end of the room. So let me go with that to Shakuntala. We heard from Dr. Johnstone that 1/3 of all aquatic food system production is either lost or wasted. Now, I know that some of the work that you've been doing is around sort of innovative products around fish and aquatic foods. So, what are some of the ways that we can sort of help reduce the loss and waste in this sector? But more importantly, how do we ensure that more people in developing countries, particularly women and children in vulnerable communities, have access to affordable, convenient aquatic food products that are safe to consume?
Thanks, Stella. Before I go to the products and the convenience, which is a big issue, no matter where you are in the world, you just have to look at the time it takes to prepare a complementary food for a child and to feed that child a complementary food meal. That's more than half an hour that a mother needs for this one child for one meal. But before I go to that, I do think that the fundamental of making the best use of aquatic foods for food and nutrition security, for meeting the nutritional needs of women and children, where I focused on the first 1,000 days, is to make use of the full diversity of aquatic foods, and we've talked a lot today about seaweed. If you look at the range of seaweed that we have and we can use in production systems and for making products, then it's enormous, and it's an untouched area. And even when we use it, it's used very much for the benefit of the better-offs and not for the poor and the vulnerable, who are those who are many times producing the seaweed. So there's such a great scope that we can use, not only of seaweed, but as I said, just the diversity of animals, plants, and microorganisms that we have in all aquatic systems. If we would do that, I think one of the steps that we should take care of, and Torsten mentioned this, is go back and look at traditional knowledge and look at the ways that communities, indigenous peoples, have been using the vast diversity of aquatic foods. And I do think there are lessons there we can learn from and combine that with new technologies and all the great data technologies we have today. Because as we know that within aquatic food systems, our data is sparse. We need much more data, just on the diversity and the nutritional benefits, the composite, the nutrient benefits, the food safety of the diverse aquatic foods. Importantly, in our day-to-day, as I said, no matter where we live and which population groups we deal with, convenience of aquatic foods products, of nutritious products, is very important. And we do have a great opportunity working with aquatic foods. Because if we would work with, for example, fish powder or dried seaweed, we are concentrating the micronutrients and essential fatty acids by a factor 4 to 5 by removing the moisture content. So these foods, these diverse aquatic foods, are truly superfoods that can benefit people. And we've heard also benefit the planet and benefit the whole system as we know it today.
So I know that most of your work has taken place in Asia, and as Essam also pointed out, there is some success stories out there, especially, for example, the Bangladesh with the Hilsa fisheries, and sort of the country really is sort of bringing that whole focus around nutrition and using sort of fisheries and aquaculture as a pathway to meeting, various sustainable development goals, including the climate action. Are there lessons that can other regions learn from Asia?
There are, and one of the things that we and others are moving together with is looking at South-South learning. We haven't used much of that. And if you look at some of the examples as we have from Bangladesh, we have lessons from Cambodia with respect to, Essam also mentioned, fishery systems. We can take those lessons to Africa. If we go to Nigeria, I am told that between 7 to 10% of the mass, of the land mass in Nigeria is wetlands. And that we haven't used the capacity of the wetlands for production systems of the diverse aquatic foods, which is very well known in some of the Asian countries. So there is such a learning we can have with South-South dialogues, which we should build on. And a venue like the COP26 and other like we have just had with the UN Food Systems Summit give this great opportunities where we can learn from each other and have this South-South learning.
Thank you, Shakuntala. I think we have time for a couple questions here with the audience. So maybe I'll start with the lady at the back and then the gentleman. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. Kimberly van den Hol from the University of Brussels and Ghent in Belgium. So I kind of find it striking that you were talking about the health benefits of fish and other seafoods, but I haven't heard you talking about what we have found out in the past few years, that is that most of our seafood is very polluted with heavy metals and with microplastics. So we have seen that indeed it is not that healthy as we thought it was, or as it may have been in the past, of course. So yeah, it's not only about climate change, but also about environmental pollution in general. So I would just like to have some thoughts about you and how does that fit in sustainable fisheries and agriculture. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So who's the brave one in the panel to take that question?
Well, I can begin, Tanya.
Sure.
Thank you. First of all, I do think, and as I said, fundamental is diversity. And if you would look at the diversity of the systems and the diversity of the production systems, yes, there are issues with food safety. There are issues with heavy metals. But if you would look at aquaculture systems on the whole, over 60% is from small-scale systems, aquaculture systems, and they are not all polluted, and they are not all with contaminants. So, and that is where it is so very important, and we do not have the data. We need much more data on the diversity of systems and the production systems and nutrient composition of aquatic foods and food safety parameters of aquatic foods. The data is extremely scarce, and we need to have much more holistic pictures and that come from different geographies and different communities.
Dr. Johnstone?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it's a challenge. And but I think the challenge is to ask ourselves how we treat the land, because what is in the water comes from the land. And what Dr. Shakuntala Thilsted was saying was that we need to treat things holistically and by systems. We've ignored fisheries and aquaculture. The last 50 years has been livestock and crops, and the next 50 years must be looking at our water, and water is the most important thing. We've talked about aquatic foods, we've talked about crops and so on and so forth, but it's the water, and we need to make sure that our water running off the land is clean enough so we can grow food in the estuaries and the rivers. So it's about a whole change of practice in how we manage and grow food on land, because that obviously has an impact on how we can get clean and healthy food from the oceans.
Thank you. So we have another question from the gentleman.
Thank you, Chair. Nicholas Watts. I work mainly in the Commonwealth space and around Commonwealth sustainable livelihoods for small-scale fisheries and fisherfolk. But I'm really encouraged here to get a sense that these initiatives are community and place-based, so they start locally. I very much welcome the point made about health. We were concerned in the Commonwealth Fisheries Programme about health of mothers and children, the impact of the loss of fish nutrients when there's overfishing and the local ecosystem declines, what that does to nursing mothers and their children, so the first 1,000 days. But there's no baseline study where we can see the before and after differences. That was our stumbling point. I think the point made about data, I would be very interested to know what thoughts you have about creating the capacity locally using mobile phones or a certain sort of educational outreach, but to develop local capacity to produce and understand the data for enhancing the transparency of the supply chain. I very much welcome the reference to it. And just finally, a comment on wasted fish, distributed renewable energy systems. I expect you're working closely with IRENA on that, but I think sort of renewable energy for refrigeration would at small scale, would help, and it's probably already underway.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. We will come back to you. I think maybe we'll connect personally to answer that question, because we are running out of time, and I would like to go to Sam last for Sam Jinandu, who's the Program Manager of Climate and Sustainability Development Network, to offer us some closing remarks.
All right. Firstly, I would like to start by thanking you all for the speaker, for your excellent thought-provoking talks, the side event facilitator for organizing and animating the sessions and keeping things both under control and reasonably on time. However, most importantly, I would like to thank you all, the participants, for your input, ideas, and discussion. This side event would not have been possible without that. When we started, I tried to, note the outline, what I felt we're trying to do here, and which involve scientific innovations, training and capacity building for locals, efforts in deepening non-state actors, government policy, project opportunities, access to financial structures and markets, and then funding structures. I'm very happy that in the past few minutes we have exceeded my most optimistic expectations by mainstreaming the role of non-state actors in the push towards food system resilience for people, and interrogate the role of non-state actors, both private sectors, civil society organizations, and research institutions in aquatic food system transformation to deliver better nutrition, reduce poverty, and address the environmental challenge confronting us to chart in clear, actionable, and practicable solutions. In particular, we have established in this side event and by our various speakers the urgent need and how to improve access to opportunities for strengthening partnership and linkages with the government, the private sector, civil society organizations, and other agricultural development initiatives to fast-track aquatic food system transformation for people and climate. As a way of demonstrating the aforementioned, we at Climate and Sustainable Development Network in Nigeria have initiated plans to organize fish farmers in Nigeria into civil society groups for training and cutting-edge aquaculture technologies that protect the climate while boosting livelihood for millions in Nigeria. We at Climate and Sustainable Development Network therefore seek the collaboration of government, Hajia Halima, WorldFish Centre, the African Development Bank, and other stakeholders to make this happen. Finally, I would like to give some advice to any organizers of future side events. Get the best organizing team that you can. We did, and it is thanks to them this meeting has been a success. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Sam, and to all the panelists. That's all we have time for today. Please do join us and follow on our WorldFish website. Sign up for the newsletter. You'll get more materials and the recording for this event. Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone. Bye-bye.